and I decided to go ahead and do the first episode of season 2 of NFL Who's Better. It's going to be my man Barry Sanders, who played with those Detroit Lions for 10 years of professional football, versus Cam Newton, the Detroit Lions versus Carolina Panthers, a running back versus a quarterback. So this should be quite of an interesting matchup if these two players were to play each other in their primes respectively. Now on this one, I want to break this down because it's running back versus quarterback, and I want to get to the dynamics specifically. Now, Barry Sanders was drafted in the 1989 NFL season. And of course, he was on that list with Deion Sanders. There's Troy Aikman. There's Jim McMahon. I know some of y'all guys don't know who that is. Let's see. There was Herschel Walker in the years to come. There was Emmitt Smith. There was Jerry Rice. There was a lot of football players in the 80s and the 90s draft, but particularly in the 1989 draft, they had a lot of prospects. And of course, he won a Heisman Trophy. He won a national championship in college football, and he got drafted. Now, everyone made a big deal out of Barry Sanders being 5'6", 5'7". They said he was too small to play quarterback. And they say he was way too small to play running back. And when he heard the comments, he kind of had a look on his face like, well, I guess I'm going to have to prove all the naysayers, the skeptics, and the critics wrong. And he did, because no sooner he got drafted to the Detroit Lions, his rookie season, he won Rookie of the Year. I think he ran 20 to 30 yards or maybe 35 yards his first 5 or 6 games with the Detroit Lions. They won football games. They beat teams that they had no business beating. They took on their division rival, which was the New York Giants and the Dallas Cowboys, and they proved that they could play against competitive football teams. And he has some memorable games against them Dallas Cowboys, them New York Giants. They were tough physical matchups, and he was able to destroy a lot of their defenses by getting through. Like, they would have 3 football players chasing him, and he would zigzag across midfield, go to the right, go to the left, straight to the middle, cut up, and these guys could not hit him. I mean, these were some 250-pound, 300-pound, 6 feet to 6'6" linebackers trying to come after Barry Sanders. And here's Barry Sanders, 5'6", 5'7", 170 pounds, run like the speed of light. Couldn't catch him. Could not see him. Could not catch him. No matter what you did, you couldn't catch him. Even some of the fastest running backs at that time could not keep up with Barry Sanders. And these were guys that were fast, and they couldn't keep up with him. And I think the only time that somebody could catch him would probably be Jerry Rice. Jerry Rice was so fast he could catch anybody. And when he went up against him, that's probably the one time somebody would come up on his position and would be able to get him. He would take the football out of your hands and take off like the Flash. Like if you had the Flash television show back then instead of today, man, he would make the Flash look like nothing. It's like Reverse Flash and the Flash. He would make both of them look like nothing, because that's how fast Barry Sanders ran. You just couldn't catch him. And he wouldn't just make 1 touchdown. He'd make 2, 3, 4, 5 touchdowns. And if the team was down 10 points, 15 points, he would rally a comeback and lead them to victory. And the fact that he would dominate the whole 4th quarter just off of his presence, and people would scratch their head and go, we got a better offense, better defense. He's going against a stacked team, and he runs through our whole defense and destroys it. And in fact, he was their defense, because without him, they probably would have not won all those football games. And even when he did play at a different position, I think a season later, to show that he can play at quarterback, it came in a moment when a player was injured, like always, and he showed that he could play other positions in the football game. But at that time, they didn't think he could do all of that, because they never seen him do it in high school and college, but he showed that he could do it on a pro level. And the fact that he was committed to winning is what drove him to prove that he won MVP. He had MVP numbers. One game, he managed to run 59 yards. And he did that in a game that they were on the verge of not making it to the playoffs, and he did that. And they were stunned because they had never seen a player of his caliber do that. And he wouldn't do it for no 1 year. He would do this consistently 2 years, 3 years, 4, 5, 6, 7. It wasn't until his 8th year that he got seriously injured that now you can see his production numbers drop dramatically. His 9th year, he would get injured 2 years in a row. His numbers would drop. And then I think by his 10th season, you could see there was kind of a decline in his game. You could tell he wasn't what he once was in his prime, but he still was putting up numbers where they could still win football games in the season and still make the playoffs. Now, they would lose the next 3 years going to the playoffs, getting beat by teams like the Dallas Cowboys, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Miami Dolphins. They would lose those next 3 years. And he began to get frustrated because the coach had got fired. He didn't get along with the new coach. They would get rid of the defensive coordinator, had a new defensive coordinator. They would trade certain players to other teams, and he didn't have the players that he needed around him to win. I mean, he was the leader at this point, but he had nothing to work with. And when he saw that they didn't care about winning football games or making it to the playoffs, he began to realize that it's been 10 years in the NFL. He made it to a Super Bowl, which, well, I won't say he made it to a Super Bowl, but they had a game where all they had to do was win one game to get to the Super Bowl, and they were there. They lost to the game on their way to the Super Bowl, which was even depressing. And then they lost the game that all they had to do was beat one team to get to the next team. So you could see little by little the team fell apart. And he felt that he was being scrutinized in the media. He felt that his name was being slandered. And when he finally made it public in 1998-1999 NFL season to retire, it was like there's something was missing from his resume, and that was an NFL championship. How do you play 7 or 8 years out of 10, dominate the football game for 7 to 8 years like he did, put up MVP numbers, win MVP? You could have gone to the Super Bowl, but you lose on your way to the Super Bowl, and then you get hurt 2 years in a row, and then they trade players away, they fire coaches, and you could see that he felt like, I'm playing on a team that, nobody really seems to care. And at this point in time in the era, Tom Brady had came in. Let's see, Eli and Peyton Manning got in here. Big Ben came in here. Donovan McNabb and Terrell Owens had came by this time period. And he kind of was looking at the future of the NFL and saw that he could compete with these guys. He just didn't have the pieces or the players. And he kind of saw that this was kind of like the end of an era, and felt that it was time to, retire respectively. And people were shocked when he done it, because they felt he could play another 10 years. And he even admitted it 20 years later in his 40s that back then he could have played another 5 or 10 years. Problem was, he didn't want to be surrounded by an organization that did not care about winning. So he didn't want to be in that negative atmosphere. And for a long time, he was blamed because when he came out publicly and said what he said, people didn't make it easier for him. They demonized him. He wrote 3 books. He tried to explain from his point of view that he would have stayed had they just been committed to the idea of winning. Give me the players, give me the trades. He was telling them, give me somebody like Terrell Owens. They wouldn't do it. He would tell them, give me Jerry Rice. They wouldn't do it. he was asking for someone that he think could help him win, they wouldn't do it. And they won't admit it, but they had a player, just like what happened to Steve Young and Joe Montana. The same thing happened on the Lions team. They had a guy younger than him that they wanted to be the new star, and he kind of saw that too, and he didn't make it into a jealousy issue, but he kind of knew the direction that they were going, so he left. And you can see that to this day, they call him the greatest football player to never win a championship. Like, as great as he was in those 10 years, or 7, 8 out of 10, because there's an argument to that. Was it 10 great years of football? Was it 7 or 8? 10 years out of 10 that was great football. So you can see how that fell apart for him. Now, as for my man Cam Newton, however, he got his start around the 2000 and I think either between 2009 or 2010 NFL draft. And it wasn't until 2011, 2012 that we got to see him become the first ever, if not the first ever, either the second or third NFL player in NFL history to be the first pick overall, and become a black quarterback of the Carolina Panthers. Now, this team has had a black quarterback before, but that guy, we're not going to even talk about that guy. But Cam Newton became their man. And again, this was a guy who put up massive numbers. Now, he was around between 6 feet to 6'1", maybe 6'2", and he had a big frame. Like, he was like between 200 to around 230 pounds of muscle. So he was bigger, stronger, faster. He could play offense, he could play defense. This is what we thought of Cam Newton in the beginning. But we didn't know that he had weaknesses. And he would make a touchdown and do the Superman, because Superman was his favorite hero growing up. Now, he's from Atlanta, Georgia. He comes from a middle-class family background. He did play at Auburn. He won the Heisman Trophy. He took them to a national college football championship, respectively. And then he played with the Carolina Panthers. Now, his first year as a rookie, he won Rookie of the Year. Then I think closer to when they were getting ready to win the Super Bowl, he won MVP. A lot of people felt he should have not won it because he didn't deserve it. In the beginning, people were just hating on Cam Newton, but then when you see him lose into the Super Bowl, you could see why they say he should have never won MVP in the first place. And he would just keep beating the Dallas Cowboys. Like, he would kill the Dallas Cowboys. He would have matchups against Tom Brady and the Patriots, and Tom Brady commented that he's going to be good in the future. He would have matches against Peyton Manning when he was with the Denver Broncos. He had a shooting out football match with future Hall of Famer Wilson of the Seattle Seahawks. Like, he was competing at a high competitive level against these teams. They would win football games. They would make playoffs. They would win a playoff game. Then they would win 2 playoff games. Then they lost a football game on the way to the Super Bowl. And then after that, they made it to the Super Bowl. And they was deemed the perfect football team because they were undefeated. They had beat the Patriots twice, something that's hard to do in the NFL. They beat Pittsburgh Steelers. They beat the Dallas Cowboys, the Giants, the Dolphins, the Broncos. They beat all the best teams in the NFL, but when it came time to going to a Super Bowl against the Denver Broncos, Peyton Manning and those Denver Broncos, people said that because they won that game in the season, that it was a fluke, and it was. It revealed that he could not go up against a strong offense. This was kind of like the same matchup when it was a year earlier when Russell Wilson and the Seattle Seahawks and the Denver Broncos had went to a Super Bowl. Remember that? They called that matchup the greatest offense versus the greatest defense. And from out of nowhere, Seattle proved skeptics and naysayers wrong. And then a year later, Peyton Manning comes back, which is supposed to be his retirement before he wins the Super Bowl. And we see Cam Newton misfire on the football. He gets sacked 10 to 11 times. He's getting knocked over by 3 football players. He fumbles the football. And for 2 quarters, we don't even get to see him throw. And then there were the reports he was injured. He played injured. He threw the football injured. He was hesitant. He had no confidence in himself. And I'm like, this can't be the same Cam Newton that won MVP, that won Rookie of the Year, that played 5 years of football talking trash to other quarterbacks on the other team. And then when he finally gets to a Super Bowl, your undefeated record gets broken. And the fact that he had a meltdown in a Super Bowl. And I think this is what Barry Sanders was trying to tell the next generation of football players for so many years. It's one thing when you get to the championship game, whether it's college or pro. It's another when you make 1 or 2 touchdowns and you celebrate like you won the championship, because in reality, you know you're not going back there ever again. And people thought Barry Sanders was just player hating. He was just trying to make a known fact. He know a lot of football players with that ability and that talent, and they never get back to the championship game because they don't understand it takes growth, it takes maturity. And we could see the immaturity in Cam Newton, obviously. We could see him, cussing at the referee officials, fighting among other players, getting in the shuffle matches, arguments, don't want to talk to the news media, because it's finally been confirmed that he had to play in a system and that he could not win as long as he was in a system. And he was exposed. He could play defense, but he couldn't play offense. And he could not go against an offense, which was the Denver Broncos. Too much firepower. And as you see, a year after they lost the Super Bowl, they didn't even make it to the playoffs. They had the worst record a year after the Super Bowl. Then his second year of losing a Super Bowl, he had another meltdown. So 2 years after losing a Super Bowl, he still could not return back to what he once was. Then it was 3 years. Then it was 4 years. Now you see it's 5 years after he lost a damn Super Bowl, and he still hasn't been the same player. I mean, he's been injured for the past 3 out of 5 years. He's been injured repeatedly, constantly. And you've been asking yourself, is it the offense? Is it the defense? Is it the coaching? Is it just his way of playing? And they confirmed that style that he played was from college, and they said he should change up the style, and he refused to do so. And when he did change up the style, then they had traded players. And then you could see there's something wrong in the element in the way he plays. Now, to me, if you take Cam Newton in his prime way before losing into the Super Bowl, and you take Barry Sanders up until 7 or 8 years in his prime before he got injured in year 8 and year 9, and in his final season he tried to put up superstar numbers, you ask who's better. I probably would be, even though Barry Sanders did not make it to a Super Bowl, I would choose Barry Sanders over Cam Newton. So what if he's a running back? It's the fact that guys were bigger and stronger and he could outrun them. He outran the fastest guys at his position and they couldn't catch him. Cam Newton is a quarterback who could play multiple positions, but it's mostly quarterback. And when you look at Barry Sanders, he always had confidence in the game. He was always certain that no matter what happened in the game, whether it was the first, second, third, or fourth quarter, he was always laser focused on getting the job done. He would play hurt. Didn't matter to him, he would play. It's hot, it's cold, it's raining, he would play. Cam Newton would try to play in these conditions, but would get overwhelmed. And Barry Sanders can play through an offense or a defense like that. Had that been Barry Sanders in his prime against a Peyton Manning in the Denver Broncos, he might lose the Super Bowl, but it would be unnoticeable. With Cam Newton, it's noticeable because you're the quarterback and the ability to throw the football was taken from him. Whereas Barry Sanders, he takes your ability away to throw the football and controls the whole entire football game. It's like he is the Barry Sanders at that position of running back. and can control where he wants the game to go. If he wants it to go into overtime, he'll let it go into overtime. If he wants it to end in the fourth, he'll let it end in the fourth. If he wants to tie up the game, he'll tie the game up. These are things that when his career was over, then they gave Barry Sanders credit for it. I mean, they didn't give him that credit doing that 10 years, but when his career was finally over 20 years later, they gave him some credit, if not all the credit for it. So I would choose Barry Sanders over a Cam Newton. Like, Cam Newton may have more firepower. He may have more throwing football ability. He may be bigger. He may be stronger. But Barry Sanders can take your ability away to throw the football in the same way the Denver Broncos and the Super Bowl took away his ability to throw the football. With Barry Sanders, it would be hard to do it. And when you did beat him, it would be unnoticeable. And even in fact, when he did lose, it was, players would question, did I really won the football game or did I beat Barry Sanders? They always left with an impression, I beat the team, but did I beat Barry Sanders? Because that's how methodical and cold and calculating Barry Sanders was in his prime. With Cam Newton, when you beat the team and then you beat Cam Newton, you got satisfaction like, I didn't just beat the Carolina Panthers, I beat Cam Newton himself. I beat so-called Superman. Barry Sanders would turn into Superman. He wouldn't celebrate in the end zone, but he would have that serious look, the game's not over, we got a lot of work to do. That's the mentality Cam Newton needs to take an example from. If I'm Cam Newton, I would probably go behind the scenes, speak to Barry Sanders, and get some advice on what I could do at that position. Because all throughout Barry Sanders' career, he made it his business to find out who was the best running back and to outrun that running back. And whether they asked him to go against a quarterback or not, he would still take their ability away to throw the football. So I'm giving you 5 reasons why I pick Barry Sanders over Cam Newton. Now, most of y'all will get angry. Most of y'all will say, hell no, that's BS. I'm just trying to tell you, in their prime, not towards the end of their prime, not past their prime, in their primes. I'm saying in one regard, Barry Sanders might lose a Super Bowl had that been him, but it would be unnoticeable. With Cam Newton, it's noticeable. So until then, peace.